Welcome. I'm just getting the stream set up right now for a couple minutes and doing a little bit of a sound check and stuff, and I'll be starting the stream in a few minutes. So stay tuned. All right, can you hear me? Say something in chat. There's not that many people watching, so I don't know how much we'll see. But I am also recording it. I've done a couple of live sessions in the past, and the big problem I have is trying to get them uploaded to YouTube after the fact. I haven't been very good at that, which is another reason to just stream it straight to YouTube. So here we are. It still says it's unlisted. Hang on a sec. Let me make sure that it is in fact public. One thing says unlisted, one thing says public. So save. Maybe I better save. Maybe that'll make the difference. All right, there we go. Okay, so this is just meant to be a pretty casual session. I don't have anything specific in mind. I this can be just kind of a chat about programming and programming related things, or maybe even about not programming things if people want, if people bring that up in chat. I'm just in the mood to do a little bit of programming. It was some MonoGame. I had a friend in a Discord server who was struggling with state machines, and I thought, well, maybe that's a good thing to play around with, given that I'm just in the mood to just do something like low stakes, casual kind of thing. So that's my plan right now, is to just play around with some stuff for a bit and just see where this goes. But with kind of this focus on a little bit of MonoGame, a little bit of state machine things. So I want to start with kind of just like a overview of what a state machine is. The idea with a state machine, and I'll draw here in Photoshop in a second. The idea of the state machine is that there's a lot of things, both in programming, but really just in life, that the behavior changes very dramatically depending on state. So actually, before I get too far here, I want to just say, post a message in the YouTube chat really quick. Okay. So state machines, there's just a lot of things that we have to program, and there's just a lot of things in the real world that just their behavior changes drastically based on the state that they're in. And a state machine is a mental model, also a programming model that you can use to represent those types of things where the behavior changes based on what it's doing. And these are like all over the place. And an example we'll go through is like a door, in fact, in my book, there's an example kind of early on that you have to program there is I'm trying to remember, is it a door or the locked chest? Either way, it's that thing where you can attempt to open it, but that only works if it's closed. And you can attempt to close it, but that only works if it's open. And you can attempt to unlock it, but you can only do that if it's closed. And so depending on like the state of things, the available options vary drastically. And so the state is this like central element of what you can and can't do. Other good examples, there's a lot of, in video games, they come up all the time, like AI very often is this way where you have a character and it is supposed to, like, it will go into a state that is like a flee or a chase or like a head to safety or a patrol or whatever, like all these different states. And depending on what they're in and what events happen, they will change state. And when they're in those different states, their behavior is expected to be very, very different. Now I'll start drawing something here so that this gets less boring. There's a way to represent these types of things called a state machine diagram. Oh, by the way, I should say, if you hear the word finite state machine or FSM, that's referring to the same thing pretty much. So this is what I'm going to draw here is a state machine diagram. Oh shoot, maybe I'm not going to be able to, I might have to use my mouse for this. This is going to, I have a tablet, but the input for that is set up to my one monitor, and that's not the one that I'm streaming, and I don't think I want to mess with that. So, given that I can't just draw by hand, maybe I am better off with Illustrator. Let's do that. Let's jump over here because I can do vector art in Illustrator better. Sure, that's a good size. So usually you'll have these states. And usually they're drawn with rectangles or like rounded rectangles or sometimes circles. And I just, as an example, these states, they all have a name. Oh, that is very, very tiny. Let's make it much bigger. Good enough. All right, so you have these states, and each of the states has a name. And I don't need to get too precise on this. And there's multiple possible states. So it's state A, this one's B, this one's C, this one's D. So let's just make sure we've got a few different states in here. And then that should be C. And then what you have, so you have the states, but then you also define like transitions between the states, what states can lead to other states. And occasionally you have a state machine where every state can transition to every other state. Usually that's pretty rare. Like if you think of like a character that could be in like a character that could be standing or ducking or jumping or walking or I don't know what, but maybe those are the states. Like you can't just go from jumping to ducking. You have to like land first. So usually there's some constraints on what you can do in terms of going from one to another. I don't think this is well, maybe that's okay. Because what I really want is just some easy way to be able to draw a little arrow. So like you'll put these arrows in and say like A can transition to B, B can transition to D, maybe A can transition to C, and C can transition back to there. Maybe D can come all the way back over here to A. So if you're in this state, you could come to here, and then you can come back to here. And if you're in this state, you can come over to here. If you're in this state, you can come to here, but you can't just go back to A. So that's the basic idea. And then usually you'll also have these are usually drawn with a solid circle. And this is the initial state. I still don't like, I feel like that this is like way too thick of a pen, but I don't want to mess with it right now. Anyway, the starting state is like tells you this is where to begin. We're starting in state A. And you can also have like what's it called? Like a final state. And that's usually drawn with like a circle with like I can't draw it thin enough, but like a thin ring around it. So it's like a circle with like an outline around it. And so you could end the state machine by doing this, and it like a lot of state machines don't have like a final state. They don't do that. Like they just keep running in that state until the container, the game, or the object, or whatever it is that has the state goes away, and then it's just over. It doesn't matter what state it was in. But sometimes they'll have this final state too. Once you end up in the final state, you can't get back. But anyway, so that's the basic idea of a state machine. And I should say, and what I want to do here is make. I'm gonna take all of this and scoot it off to the side. I still want those lines to be thinner because I'd actually almost prefer. What does this pencil undo? That's also not quite what I'm looking for. Photoshop would be better for this, but like I said, I have to use my mouse, and yet here I am doing this. Maybe I should just use Photoshop and my mouse. It's gonna work. It's gonna be good enough. Yeah. So for example, we're talking about that door, or like a locked chest that it has several states, and those states are, let's call this open. This is where having a pen makes the biggest difference, is handwriting. Hopefully you can read. I'm doing that by mouse. It's awful. And then you can have like a closed state. I maybe should just pull out the text tool that's in here. That'd probably be better. And then a locked. And I like the spatial arrangement of these aren't supposed to matter, other than just arrange them in a way that matters. Really, it's just the distinct states and the arrows that connect them. So in this case, we've said if it's open, we ought to be able to close it. So we'll just do that. And if it's closed, we ought to be able to lock it. And if it's locked, we ought to be able to unlock it. And if it's closed, we ought to be able to close, but not locked. We ought to be able to open it. And usually these transitions also have names. So and these, like a lot of times, the transitions are verbs. They're like an action. They're a thing that happened. But people, like, you can use pretty much anything for it. But so let me pick a slightly different color here for this and say like, so maybe hang on, before I do that, this might be opened, and now I'll switch this color. So this would be like an open. So this is the verb open. Man, I hate this. The handwriting is quite a bit better, but I just, for next time. And then like this one over here is close. So these are like the verbs that I'm choosing. And lock. And unlock. So like I said, that my book actually asks you to program this pretty early on. It doesn't call it out as a state machine, but it is. And anyway, so another, and we'll get to this too, I think. Another place where state machines matter is like menus. Like you can have the menu, and you like, maybe you start with like your opening scene is like made by this company. So you have that, and it stays there for a couple of seconds or until you click, and then it transitions to the main menu. And then from there, it can transition to like the credit screen, and from the credit screen, you can transition back. From there, from the main menu, you can also transition to like the playing. Maybe there's a pause in there. So we'll get to a lot of that. But like I said, there's just a lot of applications for state machines. And yeah, so let's start talking about some implementation. I'm going to just come in here. This is just a brand new project. I actually happen to be using Visual Studio 2019 for reasons that will make more sense later, but not like we're doing anything here that 2022 can't do. Let me set my tablet aside and get my keyboard out. All right. So if we have, let's make a door class here that kind of mimics this, what we drew here. So and we're going to just start with like this. This is the simplest version of a state machine that you could possibly make. I say that, I'm sure somebody's going to come up with a way simpler version, but alas, this is where we are. So a lot of times I want to be able to see this. Take a mental snapshot. I'm moving it over to my other screen so I can see it, but you guys won't be able to. A lot of times both the actions and the states can be represented with enumerations. So we could have a door state, and the states are opened, closed, locked, and then the actions are close, open, lock, unlock. Now, sometimes people will take these and say, well, hey, these are like really like closed and close, opened and open, locked and lock. Like these are so similar to each other. What if we just used one enumeration and just like, it's the same thing, right? Like, closed, close, open, and we just like, what if we just use this and just, I don't know, call it door stuff or something. I think there are scenarios where that is a reasonable choice. But I feel like making a distinction between the state that something is in and an action that might lead to a transition between those states is something that is worth making a distinction about. I feel like they mean something different in my head as a programmer, and therefore it makes sense to like separate those, even though it does mean I've created two enumerations that have a lot of the same structure. But I think that's probably for the better, even though it is that way, because I think that the what it means to attempt to close a door versus a door that is closed is an important distinction. So you could squish it together. I am not going to do that here. I don't personally think that it is the right choice in this scenario. But yeah, so I'm going to make so our door needs to know what state it's in, and we'll just call it that. And we need to start it in a state, and our picture said we start in the open. Oh, actually our picture didn't draw, did it? Hang on. Let me bring this back over. We didn't draw an opening. Like we could have come in here and said, we're going to do, not that, black again. We never put a start. We could have come in here and said, we want to start in the locked state. And now the state machine is expecting to start right here. So if we add that in there, now we should come over here and we should say state.locked. So that's our initial state. And And now we can just have like a method that will just attempt to do one of these actions. All right, so we just pass in the action. Now, another way that we could do this is instead of, so right now we're just expecting, I'll come up here, I'll make a new door, and then we can just call door dot attempt to door action dot unlock, which it ought to be able to do, right? If it's assuming that it's in the locked state, which is what we decided is a starting state, we should be able to, it should unlock after this. So we could just have a method that just allows us to attempt to apply any of the transitions that exist, which is what we've got here. Alternatively, we could just do something like, we just make an unlock method and put our logic for unlocking here. You know, if the door is unlocked, then do that. If we're trying to unlock and the door is in whatever state, you know, whatever our logic is for transitioning, we would put that in here. And then we would also have one for a lock, and we would have one for close, and we would have one for open. And if we're doing that, then there's not a need for an enumeration. We have methods that do it instead. So we don't need both. I'm going to leave it this way, partly because I do want to show, like, the relatively new feature of switch expressions makes this kind of thing for like managing a state machine super easy. And so what I'm going to do here is we are going to set the state to, and I'm gonna use, this is a positional pattern, I think is what it's called. I forget the name, but basically we're putting two things in here, and we're going to put the current state and we're going to put the action. So our patterns are going to take under consideration the current state and the action and produce a new result. The default here, so if nothing else is a match, then we're just going to make no change to the state. What do they got? Oh, I need a switch. There we go. Oh, okay. There we go. So state equals whatever the result of this switch expression is. And, all right, so if nothing else matches, then we're just going to keep the state, update the state to whatever it already is. But if the state, so now we're going to say if the state, so now we got to be looking at our state machine diagram here. If we're in the open state and we have the action close, we transition to closed. So if our state is door state dot opened and the action is action dot close, then we want to end up in the door state dot closed. I don't know why. Let's see. Action, not action. I want door action. Door state dot open, door state dot close. And so that defines, like if I bring this over here, that picks up that one line. If I can get that on there. That one line picks up this transition right here. So if we're in the open state and we get the close action, then we should end up in the closed state, and it'll update the state of the door just immediately right here. So that is pretty straightforward. And if we are in the closed state and we say lock, then we want to end up in the locked state. So now we're just going to fill out the rest of these. We're in the closed state and we say open, then we want to result in the open state. And if we are in the locked state and we attempt to unlock, we want to go to just the closed state. So the closed means closed but not locked. And maybe we should closed but unlocked. Maybe we do that. Maybe that's a better name. I don't know. That's really long. I like it better closed. But to each their own. Okay. We could use using static door state. Using static door action. If we want to shorten this up a little bit, I honestly, that using static feature, I'm not in love with. It's super, like, the place that some of these things come from is often, like, it matters. It's important to know that, because when I see a method that is just bare, I assume it's from the class I'm in. Like if I were in here and I had a method called POW, I would assume that this POW is in the door class, when in reality we could, using static math system.math, and this is getting, you can see it there, math.pow. So I see a bare method like this and I assume it's from the door class. However, every once in a while it's pretty convenient, and maybe this is one of those, like, these all just got a whole lot shorter now because of those static using directives. But I don't know. Anyway, so with that, we actually, one thing we probably do want is something like this, a property. We can do this, and then we could come in here and do console.writeLine or .state. And there we go. So now this ought to run and tell us it's taking its time. So it was locked, then it transitioned to close. So that's, like I said, this is the simplest form of a state machine. And you just have a variable that's the state, and you have some way or another to make a request to the thing that's managing that state, which should be some object somewhere, to change the state. And an enumeration like this is a pretty convenient way to do it. It doesn't have to be the only way. Like I said, you could just make methods or something to that effect where it just will do the transitions. But I really like this approach because you can just use these switches and it's just super convenient, super simple to do. So I'm a fan of that style. The catch, though, here is that this is a fairly limited thing. Like, this only really works if the only thing that matters is the state. Like, if you need completely different behavior based on the state that it's in, then this really isn't good enough. So there is a more powerful version that a lot of people use. It's used often enough that it's referred to as a pattern. This is called the state pattern. It took me a long time for it to click, but it's honestly a really simple pattern. The idea is you take the part of your state machine, the part of your stuff that will vary depending on the state, and essentially the main class becomes a thin shell around alternative implementations, one for every state. So this door thing doesn't demand that style. The state pattern is way more complicated, but it doesn't have to be so don't use it just because it's a pattern. Use the simplest thing that can work, but once you realize that you need something more substantial, the state pattern is a pretty good choice, and we'll work through that here. Like I said, this door doesn't need it, but I'm going to start here just because I think this is the example is simple enough to grasp. Everybody's familiar with a door, and a door that can lock. That if you try to open it and it's locked, you're not That's not going to work. It's going to fail. All right. So what I'm going to do, I intentionally use this approach here because I like just how clean this is, that you can just use a switch to manage your entire state. Excuse me. You can use a switch to manage the entire state, but let's go to move us over to the, well, we could do it this way. I'm trying to think what the best way to show this is. You know what? I'm going to keep it with this attempt. All right. So what we'll do is, instead of an enumeration, basically we're going to promote our enumeration to a class. So we're going to delete this, and we're going to make a class. We'll do public. Well, actually, let's make this abstract class door state. And then you take the parts of the main thing, the door in this case, that you want, that are related to the state, and you make, we can just do this attempt. Let's see. Yeah, so we just make I don't need a body. Don't know what I'm thinking. Oops. All right, so we just make an abstract method. Now, people are going to ask this question. Shouldn't this be an interface, or couldn't this be an interface? Absolutely. I'm not sure I can necessarily articulate why I went with an abstract base class instead of an interface. The interface would totally work. In fact, it gives you more flexibility because, like in this case, like we don't lose anything with an interface, but this demands that your state objects, your state classes, it demands that they must be derived from door state. And since C# doesn't allow you to derive from multiple other classes, like it can only be one thing. It can only be a door state. It must be the door state, which prevents somebody from having something that is derived from some other class. Like this is more constrained. However, I feel like this door state thing isn't just a thing that the door states are capable of doing. This is their essence. And I think that is probably the reason that I am, like I said, I think it's happening at just a instinctual level for me. But I think if I had to describe it, I think that's it, is that the door state is the essence of what these things are going to be, as opposed to just a capability that they have. And that, I think, is the differentiator between whether I pick an abstract class versus picking an interface. But like I said, there's nothing wrong with just calling this public interface door state public, like, and then just void attempt door action. Somebody asked if I plan on making a book in regards to Unity. I have plan is a strong word. I have put pen to paper on probably a dozen different books over the last while. It's maybe been 10 years. And books take a lot of effort, right? So every book that I have said, maybe I'll do this, maybe this is a book I'll write, they have made it to different degrees of completion. And I fully expect to take some books to completion, but just because I've started on something doesn't mean that it is it's something that's definitely going to get finished, right? And then the other thing to be said is, like, I've made lists of, it would be cool to make all these books. And like, there's probably 60 books on that list. I would love to write 60 books, but time is the limiting factor. I can't do 60. There's no way. Well, I think of somebody like Brandon Sanderson, who writes, he writes fantasy, and they're massive books. Like, they're like 400,000 page. Yes. 400,000 word books. Like, these are monsters. Fantasy books tend to be that way. They trend very big, especially like not like young adult or like teen fantasy, but like adult fantasy. They tend to be massive. Anyway, he over with COVID started, and he just went and wrote in secret. I don't think his publisher didn't know. I wonder if his wife even knew. He went and wrote at some draft. It wasn't to completion, but he wrote 4 of those books in a year. And I think, well, maybe I could write 60 books in a career. So anyway, getting back to the question of Unity, that is on the list. It's one I would like to do. However, it's not like it's imminent, so it could happen soon. And one of the reasons why I haven't put like lots and lots into a Unity book is that Unity has there's a lot of content out there already, so it's a very competitive space, and I don't like it. It does take a while. It's a lot of effort to make a Unity book. So I definitely appreciate hearing feedback about what people are interested in, because that helps me judge whether where I should be putting my effort into. So if people are interested in a Unity book, I'd love to hear that. I like Unity. It's a good engine. But like I said, I have other books that are much farther. Let me just put it that way. But other books that are much farther along than a Unity book right now. And I honestly, other than the C# Player's Guide, I don't have any other book that is far enough along that I'm willing to like commit to it publicly. So, anyway, let's see, where was I? But that's a good question and a good distraction. Now let me figure out where I was again. So we're going to make this attempt method. So what we need is basically implementations of this class, one for every state. So we have 3 states. We have I already deleted the enumeration. It was opened, closed, and locked. So what we would theoretically need here is public class opened door state, and derive this from door state. And then we just implement that method, public override void attempt. I'm gonna do nothing in that for the moment. I'm gonna kind of build a little more skeleton here really quick. Right, so these don't do anything, but now the idea would be with all these classes, and you can clearly, there's a lot more code involved here than when we just had the simple enumeration. So again, we don't want to overcomplicate it. We want to keep it simple if we can. But yeah, so now instead of having this door state, what we'll have is we'll have an object behind the scenes that will tell us. Well, I just deleted that. It is still called, wait, hang on. What was that? Yeah, so actually it will still be door state. Mentally it's a different thing entirely. It's a class now, an object instead of an enumeration, but the idea is still the same. And we can just say new locked door state. All right, so now we start with, so we just create, so basically we'll have an object for each of the different states. And there's I think an interesting open design question here of, is it better for me to have like one object per state and just keep reusing them so that every door has, it'll never create new objects? And there's definitely a benefit to that. We could creating fewer objects is a good thing. I have, especially in real-time scenarios, video games is a good example of that. But a lot of other applications demand some element of real time anyway. Creating objects runs a higher risk of the garbage collector waking up and running and suspending your application for a little bit. And depending on what you're doing, to have even say a 200 millisecond delay while the garbage collector scans 2 million objects looking for garbage to clean up may or may not be something you could tolerate. So to reduce the frequency of garbage collection could be a wise thing, but it does to demand that there's 3 objects that exist and we can transition between them is actually, as we'll see in a minute, is going to demand that all of the objects are able to find all of the other objects so that they can, I mean, I guess it depends on how you do it, but restricting ourselves to just exactly 3 objects and not creating new objects all the time does complicate things a little bit. All right, so the same idea here is basically going to be like basically what we'll do is when we call this attempt method, what we're just going to say is, hey, state, I don't know, like I'm not in control of this. You're just going to you're going to do all the work. So basically, like this class, the door class becomes a shell around one of several options of state machine state classes, and we'll just we just say, hey, I don't know what I'm supposed to do here. State, you're in charge of this. You go do whatever you need to do. So if we're in the locked door state, it'll call this one down here. If we're in the open state, it'll call this one. If we're in the closed state, it'll call this one. And the catch, though, is that somehow we do need to, well, as well, like sometimes that's an important part of it, is that as an example, and I kind of hate mixing like console stuff inside of classes if I don't need to, just because now it couples these classes to the console window. But I could say, like in this locked state, in a locked state, the only action that makes sense is to unlock. So if we ask it to do anything besides unlock, then we could say console.writeLine. You can't do that with a locked door. Unlock it first. And I still have that static using directive. I think I'm good. Oh, anyway, a lot of people like it though, so there's nothing wrong with it. It's just a personal preference. I do not need this open. I'm going to close that. All right, so yeah, if the action is not unlocked, then we could, like, these states can do whatever they need to do for the state. For example, if we were using a menu, if we had states, like we could have a state for each state of the game could be inside that, like I was describing earlier, like a title card scene, or the main menu scene, or the credit scene, or the in-game scene, like depending on which screen we're on, it will, in that case, it wouldn't be this like attempt method. It'd look different, but it would just do whatever the thing is that it needs to do. It would display it would run the game, or it would display the menu, or it would display the credits, or whatever it needs to do. And so now all these states get separated out, and we don't have like a God object at the top that just handles every single state. Each of these states can be broken out, and they can be independent. The catch here being, we could do a similar thing here for all of these. So if we're in the open state and it's not close, you can't do that with an open door. Close it first. And this one's going to be a little more complicated because it actually supports multiple actions. Maybe I'll leave that off for now, but the other thing I kind of want to do here is, well, let's see. What I want to do is allow me to be able to type. So like, let's do while true. So I'm just going to read in a command from the console window, and I'm going to, if it's close, then I'm going to produce door action dot close, and all the rest of these. I probably ought to handle the scenario where I typed in garbage. I don't get one of those options. That's what this warning here is complaining about. But I'm gonna not worry about that right now. I'm gonna trust myself to get it right. And the stakes are low here. And I know what happens if I get it wrong, so not too worried about it if I get it wrong. In other scenarios, I would feel more obligated to fix that. In this scenario, given the stakes, given the users of this program, I'm going to leave it exactly as it is. So now we can just say door dot attempt whatever we chose. I suppose the poor man's version here is if it's anything else, then do pick one of these to be the default. Unlock or something. Like we could do that. That at least gets rid of the compiler warning. Ideally, I think if we didn't have one of those, we would try again. We would ask the user to, no, seriously, pick something useful. And there are a lot of ways to handle that, but it's beside the point right now, so I'll skip it. The one thing we do need here is display the current state. Now that's going to display the class name. I mean, it's going to call toString on the state. So it's, if we override string toString on each of these, we can specify what that should display. I think maybe I'm okay with just leaving. Like I said, again, that's kind of beside the point of what we're messing around with here. But there, so lock door state. Now I can say unlock. Okay, we haven't implemented transitions yet, but that was allowed, so it didn't complain. If I say open, you can't do that with locked door. Close, you can't do that with locked door. So anyway, everything but the transitions is happening, and now we have to deal with the transitions. So somehow each of these states need to convey to the container, the state machine as a whole. Like at this point, at this level, the door kind of is managing the state machine. Each of these just handle how the object should respond in different states, like different states that the object could be in. There's a lot of ways we could do this. One of them is we could say, we could basically each of these are they have to know about the door somehow, or they have to be able to communicate back to the door. So one possibility, and I don't like this one, so I'm not saying we should do it, but let's just explore it here a little bit. Is we just pass in, so this door class can leave its attempt method. This happens to be mirroring this right now, and usually they'll look similar, but they don't have to always align. What we could do is come down here to door state and say, well, I'm expecting to get a door. And now all of these are going to need the door, right? So we just, as a parameter, get the door as a parameter, get the door as a parameter, and then up in here, we'll hand ourselves off. We'll hand the door, this door to the state, the door state object. And now in here, we could do something like, well, let's make this public just for a second. There's other ways to deal with this. I don't want to pursue this path, but just for a second. Now we could, in here, we could say, in here we can say door dot state equals. So in this case, if it's anything but close, we're going to bail. So at this point, we know that the door action, the action that was attempted, is close. So we can just say equals new closed door state. And we can do a similar thing, down here. In each of these, like I said, I don't want to pursue this path, so I'm going to stop going down it. But that's a possibility, and I hated making that public, this guy public, because he really shouldn't be. We could have made a way for this guy to have a public setter that I'd like that better, even though it's not mechanically all that different. Well, we could have done that here to allow this an option to have a public setter. I still don't love the notion of somebody on the outside being able to just tell it to be a new state. So another possibility that we could do here is we could use, I'm going to say this, there's an itch in the back of my brain that this might not work, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to take all of this stuff and I'm going to make it a nested class. So these are now members of the door class, which for these, because these are states of the door, it actually makes sense. And now I can actually say, make these all private. And now, so the way we had it a moment ago, anybody could have created a new door state, which isn't really what we were looking for. Like this is actually a really good example of using nested types. This is a good place where you would want to use it. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, where's our place that we actually... Wait, did I? What happened here? I guess I deleted that line because I said I didn't want to keep pursuing that. Anyway, now, because these are members of this class, they actually have access to the door. So now it's still private. I've left that private, and it'll still work. The catch is, since I made this door state private, I can't return it from the class. I can't have a public property because now this private door state class is escaping the class. So I would either need to I could make this public. That's like the shortest convenient path to get there. And that'll do it. But maybe, like even that feels a little bit weird. Like I think maybe all these door state things are deserve to be just private. So maybe what we want here is not door state. Maybe instead of that, maybe what we want is like a public bool is open, and then just return state is open door state, and something like that. So now like from the outside, we don't know, we no longer have a notion, an understanding of like states as far as the door is concerned. We just know whether it's locked or open or locked. So now we can say the door is, let's see. All right. So now our display is just based on the door telling us whether it's open or locked. So now these attributes of the door class are somewhat separated from the door states. There's a lot that I like about that approach. And now let's see. So all we need to do at this point is, one of my complaints about having all these private nested classes is this class just got really, really big. So open door state. So here we'll transition to the closed door state. Here we can say if the action is door action dot open, then door dot state equals new open door state, and else if action is door action dot lock, door dot state equals new Okay, something like that. I think at this point we can run this and actually type our commands. The door is false and true. Great. That is not what I was. You guys probably saw that coming. I'm not sure. I'm not off the top of my head. I don't know of a way to within this expression to be able to use strings, because this is already in the middle of a string doing interpolation. So let's do this. Try that one again. Door is closed and locked. Unlocked. Door is closed and unlocked. Open. Open. Close. Lock. Okay. I think that's actually working correctly. It's nice to see. So yeah. Anyway, I think that's the basic gist of the state pattern. Is whatever facet of the main thing changes based on state, you make an interface or a base class, and then you just have an implementation for each state. And then when the container, like the door in this case, needs to do something related to something that is dependent on state, it will just defer to the current state object and go from there. Let's see. So I did say, however, that I don't like passing the door in, and I like. There's a lot that I don't like about this. I don't like just having to do that. What I would rather do instead of all of that is, and this is, I think, a pretty common pattern as well in terms of implementing the state pattern, is let's just have this guy return the door state. So here, return the current state. We don't mean to change anything. And then down here, we would say return new closed door state. And of course, got to change all of my methods to do a similar thing. Including the abstract class here. And in these cases, we just return that. So if we're going to fall into one of these branches, in these first two will return the new state. In the last one, we don't return anything, but that we didn't want to make a transition. So once that if else is over, then we return the closed door state that already exists here. And so I actually want to like invert these. If action equals door action dot unlock, return new closed door state. Otherwise, we can just do return. Oh, no, this. Return this. Now, the one thing we need to do here is this is supposed to return the current state. So we no longer have to pass this in. But what we do want to do is update our state, so that when we return a new closed door state or whatever, it will actually change us to the other state. So I personally like this approach better, that these state objects are expected to return an object that represents the new state. So that allows us to make those transitions from one thing to the next. Again, these are like, they just call new whatever, and there are some downsides to that. If you do want to limit it to a specific set of objects, because some, like these all right now have, like, they're pretty easy to create. We just say new closed door state. If these states had a lot of extra dependencies, like let's say this had like each of these had 7 different dependencies that they needed to have passed into their constructor, this would not be a very efficient way to do it. In that case, one possibility might be to still have an enumeration that's the door state, and have this not return an actual state object, but to return a state enumeration value. And then this guy, when he's told what state he should be in, he'll like switch back over to the object that is supposed to be. So maybe that's worth showing. I didn't expect to spend this much time on doors, but here we are. So like we could have like make that enumeration again. So public enum door state options locked, closed, open. And I'm keeping that private here because it's just like the other classes down farther. It doesn't necessarily have to escape the door class. So the rest of the world doesn't even know there's a state machine going on inside of this door. The door does. The door has to manage it, but nobody else knows or cares that there is a state machine here. So we can make this private. And then we can make a dictionary of door state options to door state. And then maybe in the door constructor, maybe we'll create these so we can have, what does not like about that? Oh, I need to add a using directive. All right. So we have our states that are here. And I mean, in theory, so states dot door state options dot locked equals new locked door state. And at this point, like if this did have a lot of complexity, a lot of dependencies, like we can create it here. We can populate that right here. And we just do the same thing with closed. So in this case, we're ending up with should be opened to kind of fit the is that an adjective? I think those are adjectives. It's not like I'm an English language expert. Opened door state. All right, so now we've created these specific ones. In theory, the way we had this set up before with the door states themselves, like if they have access to this, then they could just go to the dictionary and pull it out. So that's another way we could have handled this. But in this case, what we can do here is we can change our door state to not return a door state, but a door state options. And then this would return this. and there are designs here that we could do that would allow us to not always have to return. Like there's a thousand ways that we can implement this state machine thing. So I don't want to explore every possible scenario, but like there's a way we could set this up where it only has to return. Like we could make this nullable, and if we're not changing state, we just return null. Things like that. Like there's a lot of variations on it. That's one of the things about patterns that I have seen is people have a tendency to get into patterns and they think, this is well, this is the one and only way to do this. They see somebody's code and they think that's the extent of how that pattern should work. And two, very often when people learn about patterns, they think, I'm going to apply that pattern everywhere. And like we saw at the very beginning of this, the pattern, like this pattern is way more complicated than the version we had at the very beginning, where it was just a simple switch, right? Like, why not keep it simple? So don't use a pattern just because you know about a pattern. Use a pattern because it really is the right tool. Like that's when people, it's when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. When you learn about patterns, everything looks like an application of 7 patterns, and people way over design their stuff. So you want to keep it simple, but anyway, patterns are more like guidelines than rules anyway. So anyway, if we wanted to do that, we can do door state options here, and same thing here. We just do door state. Oh, what state are we even in here? Close door state. All right, and then this just is return open door state dot opened parentheses door state options dot box friend. Super guilty of applying a pattern unnecessarily. Honestly, I think there's something just inherent about it because it happened to me. That's what I did too. I tried to give everybody that warning because I did it, and I'm not sure I've seen anybody not do it. I'm sure there are people out there who haven't. But it's just when you see a pattern and you're like, that's really cool. That's a really, I see how that works. And because it's a pattern, it's these things that have come up over and over and over again, and they will continue to come up over and over and over again in the future. There's legitimate uses for it in the future. So it's really easy to just start to think, well, hey, what if I got uses for it, and to just apply it because it is meant to be reused. It's defined in a way that clearly illustrates that it can be reused. So it's something about our nature that we always want to apply patterns, and I don't know what it is, but we all do it, so don't feel bad. Let's see. I think we're almost done with this. Return door state options dot opened. Gotta change this one. And then this is so there. We've made a version now that supports. Oh, not quite. So we get the enumeration, and now we have to look up the. I'll do that all in one line. That's all. That is a very dense line. We call the specific state. It returns one of this enumeration here. It returns one of those, and then we feed that into our dictionary to figure out what object it should be, and then we update the current state with that state. So, but now we only ever create 3 objects, and that's potentially a big plus. So, anyway, like I said, this version is definitely, it has some extra complexity. This dictionary is in here. We have an extra enumeration that we didn't have before. I don't think the other version is necessarily it depends on the situation, right? Like sometimes this is better, sometimes that's better. And that is one of the hardest parts of software design is there are a lot of ways to do stuff. Some of it's just subjective. Some of it's just personal preference and team preference and company preference and whatever it is. And all of that's just fine. Other stuff, there is a better version than other things. And almost all the time, it depends on the details. It depends on what's going on. And so it's hard to have general rules that say, you know, always use this version of the state pattern. Always, never use the state pattern. Always use the state pattern, because it really depends. And I think that's one of the hardest parts of becoming, a good software engineer is it really just takes making lots and lots of code, lots and lots of programs to finally start to say, oh, I see, like I can, like this ended up being over designed. Like I didn't need all this extra stuff, and I could have been a lot simpler, or I should have switched from that simple version to the more complex version a long time ago. We really needed that extra stuff. So it's hard. And like I said, it's just that experience. You just got to make a lot of code, and you're going to make stupid mistakes. And I mean, if I look back at code I wrote even 6 months ago, even after all the years of experience that I've got, if I look back at code that I wrote 6 months ago, I can look at it and say, you know what? In retrospect, that was wrong. It should have been this. And hopefully you find yourself working at a company that is willing and able to let you, you won't have time to fix everything that you think that, but on the ones that are impactful, hopefully you work at a company where people are understanding that sometimes we have to make changes to the code that doesn't immediately and directly benefit some end user somewhere. That there's changes to the code that need to happen because we know of a better way that will just make programming simpler and easier and less likely to create bugs as we go. So maybe there's a good interview question to be asking people in all of that, of ask people how often they are able to make important design changes, refactoring and paying off technical debt and things like that there isn't an urgent immediate need. Like I don't know how to phrase it, but all right. So we've tried a lot of variations on this door thing. Oh, there was one other thing I wanted to do. That's the problem. I get into this code and I start thinking, well, one more change, which is the opposite danger of what I just said. It is really easy as a software engineer to also just fiddle and tinker with the code forever. And at some point you have to cut yourself off and say, it's time to move on to another feature. It's time to stop and move on. So, but I did want to touch on one other thing here. There's this is opened and is locked. And we just had the door class is just handling that. I could easily imagine pushing, I don't think that's wrong. I think it's okay to do it that way. But I could also imagine pushing that over to the states. Like we could say, we could come down here to this guy and make I feel like if this weren't, I don't know, public. All right, what did I miss? A return type. There. Now all these guys are going to have to. It's bothering me. It's putting that whole throw no exception in there. Anyway, we could do this. Move this decision making over to the states. Wow, that sounded almost political. It's a states' rights issue. All right. Let's see. So closed is not locked, and it's not open. And up here, the open door is this one is open and not locked. And now in here, we can just, kind of like what we do down in this attempt, we can just say return state dot is open. And right here, we can say state dot. Now, I think this approach makes more sense when these properties are not necessarily like just immediately directly tied to the state that it's in. What we had before made more. I mean, I don't know if it made more sense, but it made a lot of sense when it was just directly tied to that. But if you like, it's not too hard to imagine some other facet of a state that could vary, but you might have. I'm trying to think. If you have a character in a game, like I'm trying, like if you have a character in a game that is, their states are like jumping, walking, ducked, and you want, and the question you're asking is ducked, is jumping, but your question is, I don't know. I'm trying to think of a good example. Like is invulnerable, or is it can run or something like that. Like you can't run in some of the states, like but it isn't necessarily directly tied to a state, or like can like dash or can sprint or something like that. Because you might be able to like do like a rapid swim if your character is swimming. I don't know. Like I said, there's a lot of variability in here, so, but I don't think this approach is wrong either. So now, like basically, the entire door class at this point is just a thin candy shell around one of three state objects, and that's the basic state pattern. You don't have to like gut the entire container. Sometimes the container still has a bunch of its own stuff, but some slice of it, up to and including basically the entire thing, is handled by pick one of these state objects that each have their own logic for how the object should behave in that state. And that really is all that there is to the state pattern. So we've got it, and like I said, it's at this point it'd be really easy to add in new states if we wanted to. I don't know, it's hard to imagine additional states for a door. Nothing comes to my mind. So, Gustav, your book was a really big help to me. Thanks, Gustav, for saying that. It makes a big difference. Like you put, like this is, it's hard to put a number of hours that I put into all the editions of this book over time, but it's thousands of hours, and that's not even including the, like all of the learning that it took to even get to a point where I was willing to consider writing a book, which is, I mean, I said it earlier on about all the books I'd like to write. Like that's one of the catches is I'd love to write a bunch of books, but each of them are thousands of hours to write. And unless I can figure out a way to greatly reduce it, it's probably not practical to think I could write 60 books, which is like my list of all the books I'd love to write. So I do have to pick and choose. Anyway, it's a mountain of work, and it is extremely rewarding. And nobody writes a book to get rich, right? Like, well, I mean, some people do, but you don't. If you want to write a book to get rich, write fiction, not technical books. Nobody who writes technical books gets rich from doing it. So it's super rewarding to me to see that all the effort that I put in has been helpful to people, and it makes a big difference to me at an emotional level. So I always appreciate it when people say it. So thank you, Gustav, for jumping in here and saying that. Another tangent, but a good one. Well, that's enough about doors, don't you think? I had said we would play around with some MonoGame stuff. We spent 2/3 of the time on this, and maybe that's okay. I did start another project over here though that I wanted to do. I wanted to get into like some game AI a little bit that uses a state machine. Don't know how far we're going to get on this though. There's only like 43 minutes left before I'll probably, when the time's up, I probably need to be done then. So we'll see how far we get. But we'll leave the doors behind. I don't know if we're even going to get back to state machines. So I'm going to do a little bit of MonoGame programming here. It's not that MonoGame is better than Unity. MonoGame has less baggage. And that is a double-edged sword. On one hand, it means that just showing a really simple example, there's just a whole lot less that you have to mess with. On the other hand, I don't know if you guys have ever participated in these activities where like, yeah, just show up and we'll provide lunch and there's like all the tools that you need, all the equipment you need. It's all here. Like if you want to go kayaking and somebody said, just show up at the site, you'll have food. We'll bring the life jackets. We'll bring the kayaks, the paddles. It's all here. It's all ready to go. Like, just bring yourself and maybe a camera. Like that's super convenient to just show up and everything is there ready to go. And Unity is a lot that way too, where like, yes, there's less baggage in MonoGame, but less baggage means you got to prepare your own lunch. You got to bring your own kayak sometimes. So it's a trade-off. And depending on what you want to do, what your interests are, what the people that you want to build a game with are doing, either one could be the right choice. Unity is vastly more popular than MonoGame right now. Like if I had to take a guess, and this is really picking a number out of thin air, I would say that easily there's 1,000 times more games made in Unity than in MonoGame right now. That matters, right? Like, yeah, that's where you can get the help from and everything. Anyway, I did make a little MonoGame project here, and I'm gonna go down this path here, not a Unity path for right now for today. But I am gonna run what I've got here. It's not much. Surprise! It's I've got the beginnings of a little button and the start button, and that's because I wanted to make a menu. Oh, and maybe we should draw out a state machine for a little menu here. So let's come back over here to Photoshop, and I don't think I want a whole new. I don't think I want a whole new thing. I just want to. Oh, now it's black. I didn't mean for that to be black. It could work just fine that way. Right. At this point, it would have been faster to just make a new. Whatever. What's this doing? All right, so the state machine that we can build here is something like, again, I'm using a mouse, even though I have a pen input, but that's set up on my other screen right now, and so I can't do that easily. So I'm using the mouse, and forgive me for it looking not very good. All right, so our states would be, we're going to start and come into like an intro or something like that. And then we'll have the main menu. I'm just going to use MM. Normally I would write it all out, but again, mouse input for this kind of stuff is not very good. Intro, the main menu, and then we'll have like a credits. Geez, this looks awful. And in this case, so once we leave the intro and go into the main menu, like, we never go back to the intro again. But when we're in the credits, we ought to be able to come back to the main menu. So our state machines look like that there. And then we'll have like an in-game state. And then we won't go from in-game out back to the main menu. But what we'll have is we'll have a paused, which actually could be done as like a sub state. So, and there's a type of state machine called a hierarchical state machine that allows you to like add in hierarchy. And this actually, like, you're still in the game. It's just paused. Like we could do this as a hierarchical state machine. I'm not going to worry about that right now. But from here, from the pause, we can go back right back to the in game, or we can come back up to the main menu, so we can quit. And then from here, the other option is to quit the game and circle with a little ring around it. All right, so that's the state machine. I apologize, it looks awful, but I think you get the gist. And let's see if we can build some of this. So I'm gonna take a mental picture again. I'm gonna scoot this off to the side, and I'll have it around. I'll maybe bring it back on screen if we need it. All right, so I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with MonoGame. It's a make a new game. I've called my game this battle map because I had a path I wanted to go down. I don't know how many of you have played like the Mount and Blade games. It's a really fun game if you like kind of sandbox and fantasy type stuff. You control a little army, and you go to the villages and you recruit troops, and then you can go fight other enemies. And if you eventually can join a kingdom. Eventually you can have your own kingdom and you can take over all the cities and all that kind of stuff. And the combat's pretty interesting. It's all based on like it's probably like they've done a pretty good job of trying to be like fairly realistic to history, even though it's like fictional. Like they have like real world analogs that each of the factions map to, and they try to stick fairly closely to like what was appropriate for the era and what was appropriate, like what that country and history had, like what weapons, what goods they traded, what the clothing they wore, the armor they had, all that stuff. It's actually a really fun game. I wanted to go down a path of having AI that could like chase each other across like a map and some of that stuff, and we might get to that, but I think I'm going to start with a little menu. And again, state pattern, what we're going to have is, and I'm not going to call these states, but I'm going to call them scenes. So we'll just make an abstract. It's a scene. And so MonoGame has, if you're not familiar with it, basically everything, like it runs in here, and the two main things are update and draw. And so and these are running by default 60 times a second. So you'll get 60 times a second, you'll get a chance to do an update, and you're supposed to just put like game logic updates in here, and 60 times a second, you'll get a chance to draw. And so you can see I've already got just a little bit in here. I'm just drawing the text, and I'm drawing do I still have that open here? Yep. I'm drawing spritebatch.draw button texture is drawing the red, which is just a picture I made in Illustrator, and then I'm drawing the text start on top of it. Some of the numbers here are to get that start to align correctly. That probably deserves to go in another class, but here we are. So if we want a state machine, though, I'm not going to call these states, even though they are. I'm going to call it a scene. And I'm going to copy that pattern. I'm going to have an update and a draw. Actually, you know what? Let's make these no, I think, well, I'm debating whether to have a default implementation that's empty or demand that everybody implement it. So I'm debating whether to make them virtual or abstract. And I don't know. Anyway, I might change my mind on that, but we'll see. I'm going to put this in a separate file. I'll close that so I can see my solution explorer here. And so now I've got this scene class. And now if I want additional scenes, so like, again, like we had with the state machine, we'll just have public class intro scene and derive from scene. And I'm actually not going to call the base class. I guess that would be a. I'm making these abstract. I don't think there's a. I don't think any of these are going to actually be able to get away with not implementing these, and to just demand that they implement it from the start makes more sense to me, especially given that that was attempting to call base dot draw, and there's nothing there to call, and I don't want people to feel like if you're making a new scene, maybe you need to call the base dot draw just in case. Now, before I get too far here, I'm going to reorder those because I like update and then draw. And I'm going to move this to another file. And actually, maybe it makes sense to start thinking about before we get too far. Maybe we should, like we had before at the door, like somehow we got to manage transitions. And so one of two things needs to happen. We need to like return it, or we need to pass the game in so that each scene can like tell the game be like move to this scene. How should we handle that? I think maybe so draw doesn't need it. I think we should never be transitioning in a draw. It should only be transitioning in an update. So I think we only have to deal with it here. And I think I'm gonna go with kind of what we had towards the end there. I think I'm gonna make an enumeration here and have intro, main menu, in-game, paused, credits. I'm going to throw exit in too. We didn't have that on the diagram, but somehow if we're going to do this, the main menu needs to be able to say to the game, stop. So I'm going to throw that one in there for good measure, and then we're going to have this return one of these. And so our intro scene needs to return. So by default, this should return intro scene. Scenes, intro scene, intro. Okay, with that in place, I think we can go nuts making the other menu. What else did we have? Let's see, in-game, paused. So now we have all these scenes defined, and by default, they're all just going to keep it in the scene that they were already in, and we can come back here to the main game, and we can do kind of like what we had before, where we can have a private dictionary of scenes to. I kind of don't like that enumeration just being called scenes, but I don't know what to call it. Yeah, this naming, like that name right there, not a fan. I think I'm going to not populate that until I need to do it. I need to maybe do it here because well, I'll put it right here. Scene manager. The intro scene equals new intro scene. Now there's one enumeration option that is not in here, and that's the exit one. And we're going to handle that with a special case. So in here in update, I'm actually going to, so this says, if you push keys.escape exit, that might be okay for the main menu, but as a general rule, we don't actually want that. So I'm going to delete that. And what we're going to just do is call scene. Oh, we do need a current scene. And then we'll start ourselves off in our state machine diagram said NeoEyes asks, what are you building? So I'm building whatever I want. I'm not doing anything super specific. There was somebody else in a different Discord that was asking about state machines. They're struggling with state machines, and I thought, maybe I'll go play around with state machines for a little bit. That sounds like fun. I'm really not like, I don't have an agenda here, but we've been spent most of the time up until this point dealing with state machines, and right now I wanted to build something that's a little bit like the overworld map in Bannerlord, where you got parties that are moving around in the world and can do stuff. And I thought that would be a good place for AI, but so is the menu. So right now what I'm building, short answer is I'm building a menu system in a MonoGame project. And mostly it's just to illustrate, hey, state machine and the state pattern. So like I said, we're not calling them states. They're scenes in this case, but it's the exact same concept. So we've got, these are all of our states. What's a state machine? You are just going to have to go back to the beginning and watch it because I did cover that. Sorry. It would take too long to cover it again. Hi, David. Welcome. Let's see. So, all right, we got that. And now down here in update, we want to just call, current scene dot update, pass in the game time. And then same thing as we had before. Well, what we want to do is get the next scene. But what we want to do here is, so if next scene equals scenes dot exit. So here's our special case. If it's exit, now I wish I hadn't deleted the code that was there. Is it just exit? Don't call that exit function that often, but that's it. So, so if in every other state, then current scene equals, we just pull it out of the dictionary. So scene manager, don't know where the curly braces came from. Scene manager. So we'll just get that scene out. And then down here, what we'll do, so I already had this code in here. We'll move that to something else. In fact, I'm wondering about that clear. Maybe we'll leave the clear. So graphics device.clear, since we're painting a new picture here, This says clear the color buffer and fill it with. This is so 26 is a fairly dark gray. I mean, we had that running here. I don't know how well. Yeah, you can see it. It's not black. It actually, so this gives us just a little bit of room to go even darker for something, a shadow or something like that. But while still feeling like it's a black background. We could go a little lighter than that too if we wanted. But anyway, so this just sets the background, and then all we're doing is drawing that button. I'm going to move that off too. Let's pick a scene. That looked like the main menu, so we'll just throw that in there. Yes, nothing works now. We'll deal with that in a second. But I don't want to lose that code that we had. But then in here, we'll just say current scene.draw with the game time. There we go. Okay. These. Let's throw that in there too. Okay. How much of this works now? Oh, I actually don't want to move the sprite batch over. I went too far. All right, there we go. So leave the sprite batch there. Okay. I'm going to comment these out as well for the moment. But because at this point now, we actually have a working... Like the scene stuff works in general, as long as we, like right now, we don't have any transitions between our scenes. But it all compiles, and it should, like, the framework is there in place already, so it should work. However, so let's deal with this issue first in the time that we've got left here. I need content. Like I need, there's a font that I need, and there's a picture that I need, and somehow we got to get a hold of it, and somehow we also have to get a hold of a sprite batch. Sprite batch in MonoGame, it handles drawing lots and lots of 2D pictures, sprites, 2D images, and it has the methods for handling all that drawing. It's pretty straightforward. It has a lot of, like, it's very optimized to be able to, like, there's a reason that we prefer to do batches of sprites instead of single sprites. As long as you aren't swapping textures, as long as you aren't swapping the image that you're doing, it is actually very, very fast to just like draw a whole bunch of pictures all at once, which is the reason why people will use like texture atlases and things like that, where they just throw all these different textures into the same image and then just like sample the different parts of it when they want to draw stuff, is because that's a super efficient way to do it. The graphics card doesn't have to keep switching from one image to another. But I don't know that I actually want to keep I don't know that I want to make a new sprite batch in every single scene. So one thing we could do here is we could pass that in, which means we need to change our signature for all of our scenes. Too bad we didn't think of this sooner, but this isn't too hard to do. There's probably actually some refactoring that I could have done that would have, oops, not update. Did I do that up here too? All right, so our scene needs to also be changed to do that, and then in this case, we will call and draw. We'll pass in the sprite batch that the game owns. So there's one. Got out of using directive. Okay. So now everybody can share the same sprite batch. There's not a need to have multiple. But what we do need is content. And each of these scenes might need to load content. Now, so MonoGame has the ability to like load and unload content. And honestly, since we've got this like this scene-based thing, it actually could make a lot of sense for us to like load the content for the scene when we transition into it. And when we transition out of it, we unload the content. And we could build our state machine to handle all that it's able to like load and unload content as we transition from state to state. I'm going to not get into that right now. I think like the amount of content we've got is not so much that it needs a whole lot of stuff, but there are maybe, honestly, like I say that, but really in most games, the meat of the content, like the vast majority in terms of bytes and CPU memory, bytes in GPU memory, is usually actually based on like the level and not the scene, if that makes sense. Like these scenes of like main menu versus like intro versus credits, like the amount of content that's needed for the credit scene is usually not much compared to the in-game, all the models, all the textures, all the everything that we need for the actual game. So this probably isn't the place to handle like loading and unloading as we transition from thing to thing. Loading level by level makes more sense. But I'm going to not even worry about that at all. But what I do think we need here is anything that needs, so where were we? Over in here, the main menu scene that we had, it needs the ability to load its content. So maybe what we need, again, is to modify this to have public abstract void load content. And maybe we can make that mimic. Yeah, so this didn't have, I think because I also don't want to, let's see, load content. What I think I really need here is the content manager. And again, this is all MonoGame stuff. And I don't know that I want to get too deep into it. But it's just, this is the guy that when you need to load something from disk into memory, content manager is your guy. So if I do that, then I'm going to come over here and all of these scenes now need that. Content, and for the moment they can do nothing except so all these other scenes for right now, I'll just put this in here. Oops. I scrolled to smaller. Okay, something like that. So now our main menu scene has the font and it has that texture, and now all of this code should compile and actually work. And we could in here, oops, let's see. So this intro scene might need different graphics, different stuff. I'm going to actually take this font, sprite font, and stick it up here. And then in load content, I'm going to also get that font in here. And then in draw, I'm going to do sprite, not that, hang on, sprite batch.begin. So this is a MonoGame paradigm. When you want to draw sprites, the first thing you had to begin the sprite batch and tell it when to end. And sprite batch.draw. String. And we're going to made by some dude. So I'm not, this isn't going to look good. But let's just pick a location, 400, 400, right? I'm just throwing it out there. We could make this look a whole lot better, and the color will be cornflower blue for traditional reasons. That's the default clear color for MonoGame. So it has sentimental value to me. All right, so the intro scene is going to, this is its draw code. So now we don't have to have our main game handle all the different, like each scene can handle their own draw code, and we just delegate to the right scene at the right time, depending on what state the game is in. And what we really want here is to keep track of the passage of time. Like we can have private. Yeah, let's see. So what we'll do is let's see, private time span remaining equals time span dot seconds. So let's stay on this screen for, I don't know, 5 seconds. And then here, so in update, what we'll do is we'll say remaining. So we're trying to handle our first transition. Remaining minus equals game time dot elapsed game time dot. I actually think I can just do that because this is a time span. Okay. So if remaining is less than 0, then return scenes dot main menu. There. So after 5 seconds, I'm going to make it 3. After 3 seconds, then this should have counted down. So we're going to get this update and we're going to know how much time passed, and we're just going to subtract that off of our initial time. So after 3 seconds, we're going to finally return main menu. Otherwise, we're going to say stay in this state. I actually think that should be enough to get us into... That should work. Cross your fingers. It blew up. Oh, okay. And that's because the sprite font is null, and that's because I never called load content. This never got called. I thought we started doing that, but didn't really finish it. What I need here in order for this to work is, well, let's just do it. What I want is load the content for all the scenes. And I could do like intro, get the intro scene dot load content. You get the main menu scene dot load content. But maybe what I'll just do is I'll just say for each scene in scene manager, not scene manager dot, not the keys. The keys are the enumeration, but the values. Oh, what do we got to pass in? Content. Okay. So this will just find all the values in the scene and just load every single one of them. So every scene gets loaded at the beginning. When the game loads content, every single scene inside of the game loads content as well. And like I said, that makes a fair bit of sense here. We could load the content when we transition into it. We don't need to, though. So now let's try this again. All right. There it is. Hey, and it worked. I can't click on this, which is fine. Another thing we could do here, though, is we could do, this is a little bit of input management, is we could say in here, you know what, that was, I'm actually going to increase that. And then I'm going to say, let's see. What do I want? I want the keyboard dot get state dot is key down. Honestly, what I really want is if any key is down. There's not a method that has that, is there? Well, yeah. Get pressed keys dot length greater than 0. Oh, yeah, okay. If we push any key, return scenes dot main menu. So now if we push a key, it should move forward. I feel like that deserves to be a method, and I might make it one, though we're running out of time and we were talking about state machines. So now if I push a key, it advanced. I could do a bunch of handling for like clicking on those buttons, but I think again I'm gonna try to keep it simple here, because what I'd like is to be able to have the whole, what would be really cool here is to have, by the time we get done here in 8 minutes, let's see if we can do this. The intro scene I think is working. The main menu scene, what I want is yes, I drew a little button, but what I want to do is, here if get state dot is key down keys dot escape, then return scenes dot exit. So I ought to be able to quit the game by pushing the escape key. And so if we push the escape key, I want to go to the exit option, the exit state, which again, if we look at this, this is the exit. Oh, let's use a different color. This is if I push escape here, then I should go to the exit state. And if I push, what do they say, enter? Oh man, that's awful. Again, I wish I had. I'll mess around with that for the next time I do this. But if I have the pen, I can do it. I just can't do it on this monitor, which is the one I'm sharing. So I push enter, I should do that, and if I push C, then I do that. So now we can transition to all these other states. It would be nice in this case to have something drawn everywhere else, right? Problem is then I need that font. So, and again, I am loading the font multiple times, but MonoGame's smart enough to not like load it into the graphics card memory repeatedly. It knows that if it's there, then it's there, and that's fine. It doesn't load multiple copies of it. And but there are other ways we could do this. Like we could load a whole bunch of these resources into a shared like resource collection somewhere, and then like be able to just like pick and choose, and we just like go to that thing and get it instead of having to load all this content everywhere. I do not need that though, and I don't need that anymore. I just want to replace it. But it'd just be nice to have some sort of text in each of these that say what we're doing. So I got my menu, got my credits. Oh, hey. Credits. And our in-game scene. Okay. All right. So now we should be able to we can transition from the main menu to other scenes, and now every scene looks a little bit. I mean, it's not like there's anything magical going on in those. We were using the simplest thing we could possibly do. push the key. And now we should be able to push, what was it? Enter to go into the game. Now I can't have a way to go back. But if I push C, again, don't have a way to go back, but now we can add that. So now we got 2 minutes. All right, let's see. We can do this. All right, so if we're in the credit scene and we hit the escape key, then we want to return main menu. And if we are in the in-game scene and we hit the escape key, we want to go to paused. And if we are in the paused scene and we hit sorry, I want to do escape, but let's say so if we hit F10 and then we go to the main menu, and if we do enter F10 to quit, enter to return. I'm doing this as a reminder. All right. This is fantastic, right? I will say that this isn't really a good showcase of what MonoGame can do. This is like the simplest thing we could possibly do. We're barely touching on anything. Let's see. I don't remember. C to get into credits. Escape to return to the main menu. I push other keys and nothing happens. My cat did not like all those key pushes I just did. If I push escape, I was worried about that. That's the reason I started using F10 there, is because I'm going to make a minor tweak. We can talk about that in a second. But if I use keys dot backspace. Wait, is that backspace? Keys dot. Yeah, I think it is. So credits get into the credit scene. Backspace goes back. And enter to start. Escape to pause. Enter to return. Escape to pause. F10 to quit. Now escape to quit the game. Boom. Oh, wait. Wait, I feel like this didn't actually exit. That is interesting. Exits the game at the end of this tick. I was wondering if that was the case. And it's going to finish this update, which is not what I want. I guess what we can do here is we can just say exit and return. Something like that. Let's try that again. Escape to pause. F10 to quit. Credits. Backspace. Escape. No crashes. Everything's working. So I did want to touch on, like, the reason I ended up pushing a whole bunch of weird keys is that it's entirely possible that when I push escape in one scene, like it isn't like an event. We're polling it. Like when in here we say, is key down. Let's see, is key down. So we had, like I said, escape makes a fair bit of sense to use. We want to go back to that. Scenes dot. Oh, that was the one I wanted. Main menu. Keys dot escape. So if we want to use that, then it makes sense to go back. The catch, though, is like I want escape to move me back to the main menu, but then in the very next update, in my main menu scene, I haven't had a chance to take my finger off the escape key. Like, it's hard to hold down a key just for a single, for a 60th of a second, for it to just register just once. So really what I want to know is not just is the key down, but is it down now, and was it down before? It was up before. And in order to do that, I have to remember, and there's libraries out there that give you like an event-driven approach where you can just say when the key is pushed, then do this. But it's pretty easy to just say, this is also a somewhat common paradigm in MonoGame, is we just say keyboard state current state equals keyboard state. So we just get the current state, and then all of these and then let's see, right here, when we get all done, then we say previous state equals current state. So we just save off what it was last time, and then instead of this, we can say if previous state dot is key down is key, let's do this way, is key up keys dot escape. And so if it was up if the previous state had it up and the current state has it down, and we can do the same thing for all of these. In fact, if I had a little more time, I'd put that into a method. Like, that's a very obvious method that, did it just get pushed? And now, even though I do push escape to get out of that credits menu, it won't just immediately exit the game, which is what it was doing a moment ago. So, credits, escape to return to the menu. I lied. And I think I know the reason. The reason is the last time this updated, it was indeed like the last time it updated, it had the state, and it was the state from a while back. It was the state that had where I had pushed C to enter the credit scene. So unless I was also pushing escape, it wouldn't have mattered. So this previous state is not the previous state of the keyboard all the time ever. And I could go make a class that does that. Like, I could have this update have the pass in the keyboard state or something like that. Alternatively, like, what I'd like to do is when I transition into the main menu scene, I would like at that point to like flush out the previous state. I don't actually want so state machines, like, we can get as fancy as we want with these state machines. And one thing that a lot of like state machine implementations have is they will have for these state objects, they will have some way to tell the state, I am transitioning into you, like an enter and an exit. And we only need an enter here, but you could do sorry. I'm going to make this one, I am going to make this one virtual, because we don't need to, in most cases, we won't need to do anything with these. And we could do the same with exit. And now I need my game to call this. So whenever we transition, where is it? Right here. If the new scene is not equal current scene, then what we'll do is we'll say current scene dot exit and new scene dot enter, and then current scene equals new scene. So we'll tell the scene that we're leaving that we're leaving. We'll tell the scene we're entering that we're entering. And then we will... Then we'll update it. Okay. Now, been a lot of little hoops to jump through here, but that's the nature of making software. The main menu scene update. So now in this case, if we public when we enter, sure, we can call base.enter, and then we'll just say previous equals new keyboard state. So, oops, new keyboard state. And that should allow us to like flush out the old stuff. Now I can run this again. And despite my previous promises, hopefully this time it actually works. It didn't work. Why not? Only one way to find out. What scene are we in here? Let's make sure that's getting hit when we do that. One. It did get called right there, which we would expect. And we go to credits, and then we go back. It did get called. I don't know if this was the bug, but I did just notice this. This should be C. This should be enter. Those should match. Which again, if I had just made a method, I would not have that issue. Hi, Krista. One more time. Credits, escape. Nope, that wasn't it. All right, I got it. Let me run this, and I'll get it into the right. Go into the credits, and then okay. Now I want to put a breakpoint here. Let's do it here. Escape to return to the menu. I'm not sure why, because I thought that we had. I want to figure out what's going on here. I do need to be done soon. I need to be done 12 minutes ago. Yeah, we're going to get that a bunch right here. By putting breakpoints in, I can make it work. But that is all right. Let's see. This is a puzzle, and I'm not sure. Like I said, I should have been done 13 minutes ago. So I might need to end the stream, and then maybe I'll just leave a comment later. I want to figure it out. I want to understand it. So maybe I'll leave a comment on the video explaining what the answer is, because it's probably it's one of those things that is probably pretty obvious once I know what the answer is, but I do need to end the stream because I got other things I need to do today. Give this one more minute, see if we can figure something out, but then I just need to stop and I'll figure it out and I'll post it. So let's see. Is there... I do still feel like it's related to... Get some better insight if I just display it on the console window. Escape. So of course the thing ended. Gotta go to credits first. Credits. And now I gotta hit escape. It didn't display anything. Oh, okay. Okay. I think it makes sense now. um, every key is up, right? When we, like the default keyboard state would be everything is up. All right, I have an alternative approach here, and that is to just say first time. I'm not in love with this approach. I feel like there's better ways, but yeah, I mean, so the default state is all the keys are up, so this will be true every time, and if the current state is down, it's going to treat it as though it just got pressed. What I You know what though? Maybe I'm doing this first time thing, but I actually wonder if maybe what I need is get the actual keyboard state here. because it is in a particular state in that frame. I like this approach better than just having a random bool that tells you what state it's in. Let's hope it works. Let's see, credits, and then escape. Credits, and I'm gonna push and hold escape for a long time. Boop. Yep. Okay. All right. Anyway, there, a whole little menu system and zero AI, which I had hoped to get to. That was the reason that I called this a battle map. Yeah, box friend. That is that's what I was thinking. I mean, that's what I finally arrived at after I don't know how many minutes that was. It might have been 10 minutes of struggling with that, but I that thought didn't come to me because very often I don't like I'm not spanning multiple scenes that get the keyboard state. Like what I did usually is sufficient for the scenarios that I usually end up in. But like that was not surprising. But anyway, and again, like I could have just had a separate object that yeah, there's a lot that I don't know where I was going with that. Somewhere cool. So imagine that went somewhere cool. So we did get a chance to play around with state machines. I think they're interesting. I think they have a whole lot of uses. Again, there's a lot of simple ways you can do it. That the place we started was just a simple switch. Use that if you can. But the state pattern where we've got basically a separate object for every state and the main class that's managing all these states, just it knows which one is the right one and it's able to help the transition between the different states. But otherwise, it just for the parts that vary based on the state, it just delegates all that work off to one of several object types to just handle the thing in that particular state. And like I said, the scene stuff is exactly what we've done here. Very reusable. It'd be really easy to if I said, well, you know what, I want when the game is over, enter in your name so we can put you on the high scoreboard. We could have enter your username scene and add that really easily and just add transitions, and then from there it could transition to like a scoreboard thing, which maybe you can get to from the menu as well. And anyway, lots of ways we could do it. Really ought to put these in separate files though. Anyway, I think that is, like I said, I got other things I need to do today, so I got to call it quits at some point in here, and it's probably right about now. Yeah. Nobody Odysseus. Unfortunately, I don't. Generic classes. That is a long way into the book. And so congrats on making it that far. And thank you for your comments. I'm glad the book is helping. All right. I think that is it for today. So thanks for joining me, and I will see you guys next time.